So good morning, welcome to everybody. And today is the second day of our meeting, and I have the pleasure to be here with three speakers today. On my right side, Michele Linfozzi. On my left side, Mary Orton and Antonella Poce. This panel will be divided in two parts. The first one with these three speakers, then we will have a little break, and we come back with other two speakers that are Luigi Petruzzellis and Marcelo Huernos. The first part of the panel will be held in English, and I hope there are no problems for the public in the room, but if you need some translation or help, we can try to provide it. And so, let's start. I would like to introduce Michele Linfozzi, that is a PhD student in Historical Science and Cultural Heritage at the University of Tuscia in Viterbo, Italy, and a subject expert in Contemporary History at the University of Bergamo, Italy. He collaborates with the educational services of the Museum delle Storie of Bergamo. His field of research concerns the public use of the history, with a focus on the history and memory of migration and their representation in museum. During his PhD, he spent a period in Paris at, sorry for my French, École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales, studying the history of the Musée National de l'Histoire de l'Imigrazione. Michele, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, everybody, to be here. Yesterday, in this room, we talk and speak in Italian. Nowadays, we try to speak in English. My English is actually not a British or American English, but an Italian English, so we can also do this movement from one language to the other. And as said before, I'm a PhD student, and in this panel, I want to show you a result of my research. I'm a third-year PhD student, and I spent a period in Paris working on the exposition and also archives of the Musée National de l'Histoire de l'Imigrazione of Paris. And the comparison that I will try to show you is between the May exposition, the National Museum in which we are, and so I'm very pleased to talk in this room, and the Musée National de l'Histoire de l'Imigrazione of Paris. The comparison, I actually started a comparative analysis on the Italian National Museum of Immigration in another way, in this paper that was published on the Italian review Meridiana. And in this paper that has a wrong title, I didn't propose the paper with the title, I tried to compare the permanent exhibition of the May with a temporary exhibition that this museum organized in the last summer, in summer of the last 23. Year. Yeah. And it was the exposition of the materials of the film, stop-motion film, No Dogs or Italians Allowed, by the French director Hélène Huguettot. In this paper, I tried to compare the two expositions, and the main terms of this comparison nowadays are, for me, the terms of the comparison between the National Museum of Immigration of Paris and the National Museum of Immigration in Italy. Starting with the comparison, we can say that there are many similarities between the two museums, because we are in front of migration museums. The scientific literature on this subject use this category, don't talk about immigration or immigration museums, but prefer to talk about migration museum. There are differences between the two kinds, and we will see, but there is the same category, and they are European Museum of Migration. This is important because this typological group of museums were born abroad, and actually in the United States, Argentina, Brazil. The museum in Europe are, we can say, the last museum to have been opened on this subject. Then we have national museum. Both museums are national museums in their own country, and this is also very important because they show a national perspective on migration. And so we have the migration that becomes emigration from one side and immigration from the other. The third element of similarity is the fact that the exposition of both museums is quite recent. The National Italian Museum opened in May 2022, and the Parisian Museum renewed his permanent exhibition in the June of the last year. So we have two exhibitions that actually use the museographic technologies that are most advanced, we can say. But now let's see this exposition, and let's compare them in a more concrete manner. Okay. I want to use one room, one area of the MNHI. The pictures are mine pictures during my visit, so they are not, we can say, from the aesthetic point of view, very good, but they show how I try to watch and see the museum exhibition. This is the area where actually yesterday evening we had dinner, but it's how we saw in the previous visit of the museum the core, the heart of the museum. It's it's called Destinazione Mondo, Destination World, and it's an area that presents the national history of immigration through the individual stories of immigrants. How? Using the documents of the National Diaristic Archive, Archivio Diaristico della Pieve di Santo Stefano. And we can see how this display is made. We have the papers of the diaries, the letters of these emigrants that are showed. Here is an example of Giovan Battista Orsatti, and it's a quite important example, not only because Orsatti is from Brescia like me, but it's because it's one of the testimonies that is presented through the reproduction of the papers, not only the words, the text, but we have a scan of the document that is stored in the National Archive of Diaristic Archive. This is not for all the, not only all the testimonies are presented in this way. In the most of the cases, we have the reproduction of only the thank you so much. We have the reproduction of only the text. So in this way, we can't see the material side of the document stored in the National Diaristic Archive. We have other documents that have a material, the reproduction of other documents that have a material side and aspect. This is the comparison between the two renderings of the display. On the right side, there is a paper that is showed by the reproduction of the entire document, and the experience of the visitor is quite different in the two cases. Let's see now the Musée national de l'histoire de l'immigration that uses also personal and individual stories to tell the history of immigration in France. I focus on the stories of Italian immigration that are presented in a section that is 1917, because the entire museum, the entire path of the museum is divided by a chronological division, we can say. The dates and the years presented as the main points of the path are the dates of the national history that made the national history, starting from the year of the, we can say, French Revolution, but like in the case that I want to present, also the year of the First World War. How the stories of the individual stories are presented in this more general and national story with these objects of immigrants. They were donated to the museum by the immigrants themselves or their families, and the museum show these objects. Here we have the story of Lazzaro Ponticelli, born in Italy and emigrated in France in 1907. He was a soldier. He was a soldier in the Foreign Legion during the First World War and then drafted in the Italian army. And he was also a soldier after being naturalized in the Second World War. He was a kind of a national hero for France, and he also spent a lot of his life to tell his own story. We have the objects and also the photo of this immigrant. And then we have other similar stories. The integration of Italians in France passed through the marriage with a French women, but also through the work, and not only the war, like in these two cases that now I have to show very rapidly to go to the conclusion of my intervention. So what's the main point, in my point of view, between this comparison? That is the main point that I try to show in the paper that I showed you before. We have two kinds of exhibition, a multimedia and immersive one on one side, and a more material exhibition on the other. This is not only the result of the choice of the curators on the derisers of the museum, but there are also the legislation of the two countries in terms of what a museum is. For French legislation, a museum is a collection. So when they opened a national museum of immigration, they had to collect a collection to be legally a museum. And in this way, migrants can tell their stories in museum, affirm their identities in the museum exhibition through their own objects. In the Italian case, the case is different because we are in another nation, and in our legislation, a museum is an institution. So for Italian legislation, is not, we can say, a a duty to collect a collection, but we can do a multimedia exhibition that has also a very positive aspect. We can show documents stored in different archives all around the nation. So it's a very important role of the Italian National Immigration Museum. And to go at the conclusion of my intervention, I want just to say that MNHI is a prenatal, as was said yesterday, research. I'm in a phase of advanced research, and this is a partial result of my study. And my point of view is the point of view of the researcher and on the operator of a museum. I don't want to open my own museum about immigration. I want just to analyze how different museums in different national contexts try to tell the migration history. And then I show you the last, my last, we can say, slide on the difference, two main difference. And for me, my study will tell the story of the Migration Museum, focus on the differences between them, and try to give to the operators of the museum a study result that will be useful to think new kind of exhibition and new kind of museums, trying also to have a comparative, we can say, a comparative perspective on this subject, because we have national museum, but actually migration is a transnational phenomenon, and so it's important to compare the different national museums in order to have a broader perspective on this subject. So thank you so much. I think it's just in time.
Yes, you're perfect.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Michele, for your contribute to this panel, and I find it is very interesting, and if you want later we have to speak a lot about the difference from a material and immaterial museum. And now Antonella Poce. He is presently full professor and experimental pedagogy at the Department of History, Heritage, Education and Society, Tor Vergata University of Roma, where she teaches experimental pedagogy, educational research methodology, and museum education, and she is the head of the Intellect International Research Center for Research into Heritage and Museum Education, Wellbeing and Teaching Technology. She presently coordinates the following joint Unimore Uniroma 3 postgraduate degrees: annual empirical studies in museum education and biennial postgraduate course advanced studies in heritage education, a research concerning innovative teaching practices in higher education at the national international level. And at the end, Antonella is one of our old friends. We have a long history of collaboration here with our institution, not only with MNHI, but even with MUMA, with Galata Museum del Mare, with our director, Pierangelo Campodoni.
For long.
So, Antonella, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me at this wonderful conference. So, my contribution today will be a little bit different, taking into consideration the idea of Italian migration. What we have been doing, and the project I'll present to you, is actually a fairly big project that we started at the time at Roma Tre University, where when I was teaching there, and then it evolved, it scaled up in a European project. The idea at the basis of this project, the Inclusive Memory project, that had as a core...
Puntando di qua, no? No? Freccetta bassa.
Basta?
Voilà,
okay.
perfect.
Yeah, no, this is just, I wanted to introduce myself telling you about my department. This is the department where I'm located in Roma, and it is, you know, I always like to show this image because it shows the juxtaposition between the old and the new. And this is our rectory, this is a Calatrava building, so the possibility of matching ancient and modern is part of the mission of our university. And the title of our department shows what we mean by multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity and you know, mixing of different issues. So the project is yes, downwards. The project was a project that aimed to promote the creation of a common social memory through an inclusive system centered on museum spaces. It started already in 2017-18 with a first cooperation between our university in Rome and the university based in London, which is a very well-known university, the University College of London, that has been cooperating with us in the first dimension of this project. So the idea was to use the museum as a place for inclusion, for participation, and of course for integration of migrating groups. The other aspect, the other pillar within the project was to use innovative teaching tools, innovative and technologically advanced tools to identify, first of all, profiles of the users and increase the possibility of let's say, individualizing the message that we wanted to share. It was divided in 4 main work packages. Of course, we worked on the state of the art of the themes that we wanted to propose. We worked with interviews with museum operators, with curators, with teachers. We designed training courses for teachers on the theme of social inclusion and museums, of course. We worked on different kind of workshops, and I'll tell you in a minute what they were about. We, of course, worked on evaluation procedures, assessment procedures, because the evaluation of the impact is something that we really consider important, and so the data that were collected produced other scientific products. We worked on the development of new technologies to identify users' preferences and also ways of moving around the museum space. So we devised new user modeling system through high tracking tools. And we developed also part of the project devoted to the neural network for image classification. And this is another huge bulk of work that we carried out within this project. Of course, in the last work package, we worked on processing the data, on writing the reports, and so on, organizing dissemination events, and so on and so forth. The key points of the project: promote social inclusion for target groups, of course, migration groups, develop transversal skills, particularly communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity, create technological tools, as I was saying, and promote the creation of a shared common memory. Other partners participated in the project. What I forgot to tell you, and I don't have the image there, is that we had 7 different departments taking part in the project. So I was coordinating a group of around 40 professors working in engineering, economics, of course, migration studies, history, history of art, of course, and what else? Mathematics, architecture, and of course, education. So many different souls involved in the project, and other groups participated from external organizations like Coop Culture, Zetema, Città della Scienza, Sovrintendenza Capitolina ai Beni Culturali, Palazzo Barberini, Museo Nazionale Etrusco di Villa Giulia, The Pratt Institute in New York, il Dipartimento del Turismo, Formazione e Lavoro, Direzione e Formazione Professionale di Roma Capitale, which is all are still partners in our Center for Research and in the activities that we carry out for the postgraduate courses that we still coordinate. And the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation, that was one of the institutions that anyway cooperated in the project. As you might imagine, with this large group of experts, we had to organize the work in different groups. I won't go deeper in each activity, otherwise we could spend 1 week on this. But actually, I just want to tell you more or less which were the activities. Of course, the first group was involved in in the state-of-the-art study of, from a literature point of view, user profiling, recognition of artworks and people, how, we could establish a relation between the users and different kinds of users with different backgrounds and the work of arts that they were meeting during the activities. We developed, as we were telling you, a web app, so a technological result that is built to have an automatic profiling of the user, and so the possibility to address the itinerary, the experience according to their own preferences. Here you have a description of how the web app works, so how the profiling is devised through this kind of tool that identifies different personas, so different clusters of users where you can address your actually message. We developed also other kind of experiences with people with protected characteristics, especially we worked especially with teenagers, so the age range was between 14 and 18 years old, and we developed different kind of experiences in different museums. Palazzo Barberini, the National Etruscan Museum of Villa Giulia, and Musei in Comune were the organizations that were mainly involved in this kind of activities. And here is a description of one of the experiences with a secondary school based in the suburban area of Rome, students that were at the museum for the first time in their lives, and the experience was very successful, but I won't go to the details in this case. Another interesting work was that we carried out in the Etruscan Museum of Villa Giulia with a group of students and users from the vocational training center in Rome, people with different kind of cognitive disabilities, and we experienced object-based learning at the museum and digital storytelling workshops that again proved to be very effective. When I say that they are effective is because we developed assessment tools and we collected data, and so we can say that they were effective. We analyzed data. We organized, of course, teaching and learning sessions with international experts. One particularly interesting was this one promoted by an artist, in this case, Brian McCormack. Yesterday, he is the head of an association that is called Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, that works with this idea of involving migrants and facilitate their integration through the use of artistic performances. And so we worked with within the university using different sessions coordinated by these artists and other experts in the field. But I need to run. We had workshops for social inclusion carried out by group number 3, where we focused on training of museum operators. And so, you know, quite a big activity was carried out with museum operators. We carried out museum art cafe in order to involve other groups of people, and here we tried to focus on the possibility to support mental health problems. So this was addressed particularly to elderly people and people with dementia, and again a series of tools that were used to assess this kind of impact. The activity here was carried out at Palazzo Merulana, another very interesting museum in Rome. If you want, you know, I can tell you more later. Another very interesting activity was related to the exhibition of mathematics on display. So the use of museums and the use of our inclusive memory model to support mathematics teaching and learning. So the exhibition of mathematics as a way to create, again, a relation, a boundary between the user and mathematics, which is always seen as something that is absolutely distant from our everyday life, and instead is actually part of it. We had, and so this is always related to this. After all this work that we carried out within the Roman and the area where we are based, actually the Lazio region in Italy, we had the possibility to scale up the project, which became a European project, and it was actually funded as an Erasmus Plus grant program. We had as partners UNED, the university based in Madrid, ZETMA, that is an organization for museum services based actually in Rome, Aberta University in Portugal, Ascoli Highlands in Iceland, Interalia, which is a no-profit organization based in Greece, and the Institut Català de la Salut in Barcelona that promotes arts for health, and they're, again, very productive. They train around 50,000 people working in hospitals as doctors or nurses, or, you know, anyway, people engaged in hospitals and so in the health system. The objectives were the ones that we told you as far as the mother project was involved. We are going to support and to follow up using this model also in many other projects. We have other projects going at the moment, and this model has been and has proved to be successful in different contexts. So we are confident in going further. And so if, of course, it's a big project, so if you want to know more, I'm here at your disposal. I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for the opportunity of telling you about our work. Thank you. I hope it was sufficiently clear.
Thank you, Antonella. I think your presentation today is very interesting and very important. I think in all the people here and from home working in a museum cannot be anything else than admire about your work, because the educational service is a very critical issue on museum. In Italy, I don't know if you are practiced about that, but in Italy, often the educational services are externalized. The people work for the education are not inside the structure of the museum, and I think this is not a good thing, because it became very difficult to do this kind of project, because you have to spend a lot of money to do this kind of project, and in the most case, the external services want to earn money, not to spend money to do that. So
this is a big issue, and but that's why I strongly believe that the cooperation between universities and museums should be much more supported and carried out, actually, because as you were saying, that is exactly the focus of the problem. These kind of companies, they have, of course, they are companies. Yeah. They are, even if they say no profit, but actually there's a dimension of profit, and so the mission is different. And instead, universities and museums have the same kind of mission, and supporting each other and joining the forces, I think, is what we should look for.
Of course.
And of course also,
but it's not so easy.
It's not so easy. It's not
yeah.
so easy, but we need to be strong and fight for that.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So thank you. And now I would like to introduce Marie Orton. She's a professor of Italian at Brigham Young University in Utah, USA, where she's head of the Italian section. She completed her PhD in Italian at the University of Chicago. Her research areas include issues of migration and cultural shift, multiculturalism, Italian cinema, and autobiography. She is currently researching the intersection of constructed cultural memory and migration in the medium of museum. So, Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for the invitation. Va bene il microfono? Parto? Okay, great. I'll just start. In the international context, the number of museums has skyrocketed in the past 30 years. According to UNESCO, in 1975, internationally, there were only 20,000 museums about in the world, and that number has gone up by 5 times in the past 30 years. The dramatic increase in the number of museums, some scholars have called it the result of global cultural tourism. It's a form of study. And I also would suggest that while there has been a quantitative increase, there's also been a qualitative turn. Some people refer to this as the post-colonial turn, that especially since the 1990s, and as Michele was talking about, in the most recent, like in the past 10 years, museums have undergone this dramatic shift, and instead of considering themselves that Enlightenment model of holding on to collections that support the elite, it's become much more inclusive. I'd be really interested to talk to you more about your project. It extends to greater community outreach and in promoting educational directives wanting interactive digital experiences, and instead of supporting the narratives of, the Enlightenment elite domination, it's come to be an instrument for questioning those very discourses. My presentation today, I'm very scared to use this. Okay, my presentation today will compare 3 American museums that look at specifically Italian migration and the Italian diasporic identity. People are familiar with Ellis Island, the Italian American Museum of Los Angeles, and what is called, if you can, the picture is small. I also took my own pictures, so yours, I was admiring the Michele's, yours were great. This is called the Mob Museum in Las Vegas. Of these, only Ellis Island self-identifies as a migration museum as the taxonomy you were using. The second, IMLA, identifies as an ethnic space, and the third considers itself a theme museum. I just want to explain kind of my underlying ideas as I approach this. My theoretical approach is, first of all, that museums function, all museums function because they make a truth claim. As that, I see a museum very often as kind of an autobiographical act for a group. My second claim is that for these 3 museums I'm comparing today, they all have a very dramatic connection to the space. The physical space of the museum, which is highly contested, and especially the first 2 examples I'll talk about, but it's connected to the narrative that they're constructing. And I also think that their project is basically one to seek legitimization. On the groundwork for my comparison, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background about the museums. I know many people have visited Ellis Island, so I'll be quick. It started, basically this museum started because they wanted to restore the Statue of Liberty for its centennial celebration. And so that's how Ellis Island was kind of born, and there was a big project and lots of donors. And so it took 8 years of fundraising before Ellis Island was opened in the 1990s, and it has over 3 million visitors every year. When you first walk in to Ellis Island, the first thing you'll see, you'll see this baggage, all this luggage on your left, and you'll see this huge wall-sized flag of faces, and those faces are all pictures of people who either passed through Ellis Island or their descendants, and I'll explain later how you can get your picture or your ancestor's picture up on that wall. What I see both of this as, and that juxtaposition, as the museum clearly framing migration as a special and kind of exceptionally American experience. The museum is also very self-aware. The entire 3rd floor is an exhibit about the museum. It tells how the museum started in 1808 as a tavern, and then it develops how it became an immigration station in 1892, and it operated for 60 years. And it gives a history of the 12 million people who passed through Ellis Island. Let me go here. Okay. As visitors walk through these areas that were once examination rooms or cafeterias or dormitories, they'll see these placards and these explanations. A lot of them are about anti-immigration policies or attitudes or newspaper articles of the time, and this is especially where we'll see the Italian diasporic identity on display, because Italians are cast very much as their main essentialized identity is victims of discrimination. Okay. In general, the museum has very few collections. It's not a law either by American law. And so this exhibit called Treasured for Home is actually very exceptional because it has actual artifacts. And these are all artifacts from the Sicurella family who migrated from Sicily. It explains their story. It has excerpts from the children's diary. It tells the story of all 9 children of Pietro and Rosa and the things that they did. These were donated by the family. But this forefronts, I think it forefronts the idea that the family was essential to the American experience. And it also forefronts the role of immigration in the commercial industrialization of the United States that was taking place in the peak of migration for Italian migration, which was the 19-teens through the 20s. It also really recasts immigration as this affirmation of the family, when we know, statistically speaking, that was exactly what did not happen. Migration more often divided families than united them. So this is clearly a very special rewriting of that history to give a very particular kind of interpretation. I see the inclusion of family artifacts and personal narratives in this exhibit and in general in Ellis Island as a method the museum is using to humanize, to personalize, and especially to Americanize the migration, the idea of mass migration. The Ellis Island experience especially highlights the drive to have individual visitors make a personal connection with the history of migration. There's a whole floor called the Ancestry Center, and here you are encouraged to go and look up your ancestors who may have passed through Ellis Island, and that's where you can put in a request. It costs $50, but it will be granted to put a picture in of your relatives, so they will be on the Flag of Faces for 3 weeks. Or you can even put your own picture in if you want to. And then you're also encouraged in that second picture on the left, you're encouraged to go through the exact same series of tests that people who migrate to the United States have to take and pass to become a naturalized citizen. And it's kind of scary because this tube comes along and closes you off, and you're asked all these very specific questions about the American Constitution, and every single person who is an American citizen who wasn't naturalized fails the test. We're completely ignorant about our own history. So yeah, it's clearly there to make that point. Oh, and yes. I also suggest that this experience is to reinforce, again, this idea of American exceptionalism. I'd like to contrast that. I appreciate what Michele said about the value of comparing museums, so I'm looking forward to talking about that more. The IMLA, and can you see what they did with the name? It's I am Los Angeles. Oh, it's very intentional. It's very intentional. So the I am, and its name is the I am LA. That's the name of the museum. This in Los Angeles shares very much some of the same techniques, but departs from, and I would love to talk more about the educational initiatives because that is something that's been a driving force in the IMLA. It identifies as an ethnic museum, and it's concentrated on forging this idea of a singular Italian identity that is being transmitted, especially the idea that there was an Italian identity for those who came to California, and it's a way of inserting themselves into Californian history, but also by greater extension into American history, and a validation of that. I thank Joseph Shora, who's here now for his research with Laura Ruberto, who have attributed the explosion of these kinds of what are called ethnic museums. In Los Angeles, this is on a street with 7 other museums. There's the Chinese American Museum and the Mexican American Museum, and it's called Museum Street. This explosion of ethnic museums, especially for Italian Americans, they have termed the ethnic revival of the 1970s, when ethnic groups had achieved a certain level of social capital and enough wealth that they affirmed those identities and their belonging by creating museums about their group. And Shora and Ruberto have pointed out that especially one of the discourses used to that is to affirm traditional gender stereotypes. All the museums do that. The IMLA, let me give you a little bit more. Oh, yes. It's located in what is called the Italian Hall. That's because this building in 1908 was built specifically as a business endeavor. The Italian American community was big enough that someone completely unassociated with that community wanted to capitalize on that group and built a building that she called the Italian Hall, and then rented it to the Italian American community for them to have weddings and parties and kind of community activities, and it became their hall. And it was very commercially successful for her and for the Italian American community. It became their place of gathering for 3 generations. However, this hall, I mean, of course, the neighborhoods have changed since 1908. And so this building, which is now the Italian American Museum, is now located in what is now the Mexican American area of Los Angeles. And when they wanted to open the museum about 10 years ago, there were conflicts about that, because it was the first of the ethnic museums to open in this area. And so the concern, the anxiety that the Mexican American community have, which was absolutely founded, was that other areas would try to do this, other ethnic groups would, and they were right, they did. So there were a lot of conflicts between the Italian American community and the Mexican American community of this idea of who owned the space. And they resolved their conflicts without having to go to court, but there's still quite a bit of tension. Mostly it's fights over parking. That's how it manifests itself now. But there's still a lot of tension over who gets to own this space. The identity in this museum, there are many specialized exhibits, but one of the most problematic elements of the stereotype of Italian Americans is the gangster, the Italian mafioso stereotype, and that doesn't exist in any of the permanent exhibits of this museum. It's also completely muted and absent from Ellis Island. That just looks like doesn't happen. We don't address it at all. However, when I visited the IMLA, it was so interesting to me that both the museum guide and the assistant I talked to both felt like it was absolutely essential. I go to this one secret part of the museum that used to be an illegal bar during Prohibition, where they would make illegal alcohol and sell it. They call it the speakeasy, which is what it was called. And everybody, so of course it's not part of the permanent exhibit. It has a tiny, tiny little placard there, but there's this kind of surreptitious experience that you can go see the illegal part of what was this story. So that kind of complicated relationship with the gangster idea is very much present there. By contrast, in the Mob Museum of Las Vegas, straight front and center, right? That is exactly what's being glamorized and exactly what's being commercialized. The museum, again, the space is very important because this is the former courthouse. So the Mob Museum now exists in the courthouse. And it's right in downtown Las Vegas, right in the commercial center, right by the casinos. It's on the Strip. This offers an experience. They're very interested in an experience. So if you go there, sorry, my pictures are horrible. If you go there, you buy an experience. And so one thing you can do is go down to the third floor, which is an entire remake of an illegal speakeasy bar. They also have a lot of weddings there, if you want to think about that for a minute. You can taste illegal alcohol that's distilled right in the museum and sold in the gift shop. You can have these, you have to be 18, but they have these kinds of experiences. You can also, they also have, this is the bar up in the right-hand corner, and there's the distillery. There's also an element of law enforcement, and so you can learn to make fingerprints. You can also buy a third experience where you reenact a crime with an actor, and you get to be a law enforcement agent, and there is an actor who pretends to be a criminal, and I'll let you think about that. We can talk about it more. The Mob Museum has been wildly successful. It has tens of thousands of visitors a year. It's now a national museum. But the question still is, do they glamorize and capitalize this image of the Italian gangster by demonizing Italians and Italian Americans? I spoke with the director, Jeff Schumacher, and he believes that this is an image that exists. So, as we say in English very often, if you can't beat them, join them. And so his attitude is very much just lean in because this is going to happen anyway. He also explained to me how contested the space was again, because when this Mob Museum was proposed, and it was proposed by the mayor of Las Vegas, Oscar Kaufman, who was a former defense attorney for the Las Vegas mob. And he has his own exhibit in the museum. He proposed it, and there was huge outcry from Italian American community groups who said, this is detrimental, these are negative stereotypes, and it looked like the Italian American resistance would win. But what the museum did, and this was Oscar Kaufman's idea, he invited a former FBI agent who is Italian-American, Ellen Knowlton. She was actually assistant director of the FBI, to head the project, and she reassured the Italian-American community that this would not be a negative portrayal, and she was very effective. Her leadership, she became the director of the museum board, and there has not been any more outcry, and the museum did go forth. What I want to conclude with, I'm concluding, is that this project, examining this project, led me to really consider the glamorization of violence that's essential to this stereotype. The museum owns part of the wall from the St. Valentine's Day massacre in 1929, where Al Capone's soldiers killed the Irish mob group, and they have highlighted for you where the bullet walls are in the wall itself. They also have an exhibit called The Mob's Greatest Hits, if you can see that. I know, yep. And so there's this, I think this is one of the things that's always considered. My question too, what I also noticed in this project was the incredible amount of influence and power that museum directors have. Even though these museums all have an overseeing board and trustees, the individual curator ultimately has a lot of power over what is displayed, who displays it, how it is interpreted, and that individual power of creating history, I think, is parallel with how it's recorded in the museum. And my final question is, that I'd just like to offer for your consideration. In terms of legitimization, in a deeply capitalistic society like the American society, up to what point can we say that the ultimate form of legitimization is commercialization? Because in for-profit museums like Ellis Island and the Mob Museum, not IMLA, which is nonprofit, so it does not have a gift shop, the point of entry and the point of exit for both is the gift shop. You pass through it to leave and to come in. And in both places, in this final and initial point of contact, you can buy books, images, t-shirts, and toys all about the museum's content. And I would argue you can also buy a certain interpretation of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. I think your presentation today, it's very, very interesting and makes me reflect a lot about the imaging of the Italian abroad and the problem we have with the stereotypes, for example. And even here in a museum, we speak about mafia and criminality and something else because it's not something we cannot say, we cannot talk about. And it is important because, as you show us just before, abroad, not always people think about this kind of criminality like a real problem for our society and for the other society. Obviously, today, mafia is not something so visible like in the past. They are not so violent in the crime, but they are maybe worse than before because they are inside of every level of the society. And I think something like the mob exhibition are not so useful to explain people and young generation, which is the core of the problem. But I never visited it, so this is an opinion just seeing your presentation. Maybe in the future I will go in the United States and visit this kind of museum. So
You agree with me, so I like what you say.
okay, thank you. So
it's also true that, sorry if I say that, but it's also true that when, for instance, we talk about speakeasies, it's part of, it's in the literature, it's Fitzgerald, Fitzgerald novels. I mean, it's part of what, we went through. So, I mean, we can't neglect that. No, that's the point I think you were making. Thank you so much for your contribution. It was really inspiring. Thank you.
volete aggiungere qualcosa?
Facciamo le domande, poi magari ne faccio una io. Prima vediamo se ci sono.
Facevo la pausa. Sì.
I have a consideration about the two interventions, and Starting with the last one, I think that it's very important the way in which in Ellis Island the family is presented, because we are talking about identities. The Italian identity is, the family is a very important element for, and also for the Italian-American identity, we can say. It's also important to say that a thing is the memory and the identity, another is the history of immigration. The history of immigration tells us that the immigration in the United States splitted the families, divided them, at least in an initial part of the movement. So the role of museum on this topic is to insist on the memory and the identity of the Italian-American and tell that the family is at the center of our memory and our identity, or trying to tell the history of immigration. We talk about collective memory, that is a very important category, and we have to think how history, identity, and memory can make their dialogue in the museum space. I think all the monuments that in the United States tell the history of immigration with an image of a family that is arriving. I just pointed out Indicando la via al futuro in New Haven is a new monument in the public space. We have a family of immigrants that is arriving. This is not how the mass immigration was. This is important. I think that the museum have to tell and to question these identities and these memories, to focus also on history. I don't know what do you think about that?
Yeah, it is absolutely true what you're saying, and the dialogue that you were mentioning was one of the main points that we tried to develop through the different workshops that we carried out within the project. Because as I was saying, any museum tells a message. You know, there's a communication. There's a communication aim in what any exhibition, any collection tells. The key point in our hypothesis of work, in our hypothesis of work was to try to develop certain strategies that could help anyone entering that museum to find their own identity, also through the museum message that was, of course, clear anyway. But through different kind of strategies, we used especially object-based learning, but not only object-based learning, thinking routines, helping groups, very mixed groups with very different backgrounds, through discussion, cooperation, collaboration activities, find their own background, their own identity, and creating together with the others a new memory. So this idea was exactly therein. But as we were saying, we need to support certain kind of activities. And if we, as we were saying before, if we don't have support in devising different kind of these kind of ways, and the educational services, the public engagement departments are to be involved, and they have a huge work to do. And I know it is not always easy, especially to have data on what you are doing. So many museums, working with museums all over the country, and also beside our country, it is always difficult to have the possibility to monitor and value what you have been doing. Because any museum carries out an important work in engaging the public. But then if we don't measure some way, if we don't value the impact of what we are doing, and we don't maybe readjust our interventions to support that kind of result that we are looking for, it is difficult. But then, as we were saying, museums don't have enough resources to do that.